Back when I was 24, I took my very first solo trip outside of North America. I ended up picking Thailand because it was super affordable, looked absolutely stunning online, and a few of my buddies had been there and said they loved it. For the first week or so, everything went perfectly. I spent most of my time bouncing between Bangkok and some of the smaller beach towns. The people were incredibly welcoming, the food was amazing, and honestly, I never felt unsafe for a single second. But things took a sharp turn during the second half of the trip. I had booked a 3-night stay at a small, secluded hotel just outside of Krabi. It wasn't a resort or anything fancy, just a quiet, low-key spot with maybe 20 rooms spread across a few separate buildings. It was surrounded by dense jungle on 3 sides and faced the ocean on the 4th. The area was totally isolated, which was exactly why I chose it in the first place. I wanted to get away from the crowds. On my second day there, I rented a scooter and spent most of the afternoon exploring the coastline. Around sunset, I decided to stop at a little roadside restaurant about 20 minutes away from my hotel. There were only a few other people there. I grabbed some dinner, had a couple of beers, and started heading back just after dark. About halfway back to the hotel, I noticed another scooter riding behind me. I didn't think much of it at first. The road was basically just one long, empty stretch along the coast, so it made perfect sense that someone else would be traveling in the same direction. But after a few minutes, things started getting weird. Every single time I slowed down, they slowed down. Every time I sped up, they sped up. At one point, I decided to test my theory. I pulled over completely onto the shoulder and pretended to check my phone. The scooter finally passed me. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking I was just being paranoid. But then, about 50 yards ahead, the rider pulled off the road and stopped. He just sat there on his bike, waiting. I stayed exactly where I was for maybe 30 seconds, my heart starting to race. Instead of keeping go, I yanked my scooter around and headed back in the opposite direction. I drove until I found a brightly lit gas station with several people standing outside. I hung out there for about 15 minutes, trying to calm down. Eventually, I convinced myself that I was completely overreacting. I mean, it's a public road, right? So I turned back around and headed to the hotel. When I got back, everything seemed totally normal. The next day, I spent most of my time chilling at the beach. Around noon, I noticed a guy sitting completely alone near the tree line. He wasn't looking at the ocean, and he wasn't on his phone. He just seemed to be staring at the people on the beach. More specifically, he was watching me. The only reason I paid any attention to him was because he looked incredibly familiar. It took me a minute to piece it together, but then it hit me. He was wearing the exact same dark jacket as the scooter rider from the night before. I couldn't be 100% certain because I never got a good look at the rider's face in the dark, but I got this instant awful pit in my stomach. I decided I was done with the beach for the day and packed up my stuff. As I walked back toward the hotel, I glanced behind me. The man was walking too. He wasn't walking directly behind me. He kept just enough distance to make it look casual, but he was definitely following me. I hurried back to my room and stayed inside for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, I felt so uneasy that I decided to mention it to the guy working the front desk. He listened politely, but he didn't seem overly concerned at all. He gave me a reassuring smile and told me to call the desk if anything actually happened. Honestly, hearing myself say it out loud made me feel embarrassed. The whole story sounded pretty far-fetched. A guy was on the road and a guy was at the beach. That was it. I went to bed that night feeling stupid for making a big deal out of nothing. But around 2 a.m., I woke up needing to use the bathroom. The room was pitch black,
except for a little bit of moonlight filtering through the gaps in the curtains. As I sat up in bed, I heard something right outside. At first, I thought it was just a stray animal moving through the brush. Then I heard it again, distinct, heavy footsteps. Remember, my room was on the ground floor. The footsteps stopped directly outside my window. I sat completely still, barely daring to breathe. Maybe 10 agonizing seconds passed, and then I heard someone try the door handle. It was very gentle, like just one slow, deliberate turn. My heart immediately started pounding against my ribs. The handle clicked back into its normal position, and then there was dead silence. A few seconds later, there was a second attempt. This time, they jiggled it slightly harder. Panicking, I grabbed my phone and immediately called the front desk. Nobody answered. It rang and rang until it went to voicemail. That's when it hit me. The front office closes overnight. The hotel didn't have overnight staff. I was completely on my own in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, the footsteps moved away from the door. I started trying to rationalize it, telling myself it was just another hotel guest who got drunk, lost and confused about which room was theirs. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe it was pure adrenaline, but I stood up, crept over to the window and pulled back a tiny corner of the curtain. There was a man crouched directly beneath my window, looking straight up.
The exact second he saw the curtain flinch, he stood up and bolted into the dark jungle. I ran into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor, shaking until sunrise. The hotel owner finally arrived around 7 a.m., and I broke down and told him everything. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, someone looked genuinely terrified for me. He asked me to describe the man in detail. The moment I finished describing the dark jacket and his build, the owner pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was him, the exact same guy. The owner told me that the man was definitely not a guest. Apparently, local businesses had reported him to the police several times over the past year. He was known for targeting solo tourists, sometimes tracking them for days at a time. Nobody knew exactly what his intentions were because he always managed to vanish into the jungle right before the cops showed up. I packed my bags and checked out right then and there. The owner was super cool about it and helped arrange a private ride to take me to a different hotel much closer to the main town. I genuinely thought that leaving that isolated area would be the end of it. But about 2 hours into the drive, we stopped at a convenience store so I could use the restroom and grab something to drink. While I was standing at the counter paying for a bottle of water, I happened to glance out the window. Across the 2-lane road, there was a scooter parked beneath a tree. The rider was wearing a dark jacket, just staring at the store. The very instant our eyes met through the glass, he started his scooter, pulled onto the road, and sped away. That was the last time I ever saw him. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted from me. I don't know if he intended to rob me, kidnap me, break into my room, or something worse. He never actually made a physical move on me. He just watched. He tracked me to my isolated hotel, stood outside my room in the dead of night, and somehow he knew exactly which convenience store I was stopping at hours away. I've traveled to a lot of different countries since then and had plenty of weird experiences, but nothing has ever matched the sheer paralyzing terror of seeing that man crouched beneath my window at 2 o'clock in the morning in a foreign country.
The next story.
Back when I was 17,
my school organized a 5-day trip to Brussels, Belgium. I had a bunch of my close friends with me, so we were all hyped, just looking forward to having a killer time and exploring a new city. Since it was an official school trip, our daily schedule was pretty much packed with mandatory activities. Don't get me wrong, most of it was actually really fun and everyone was getting along great, but I've always been the type of guy who likes to color outside the lines. I loved sneaking out and doing things we weren't supposed to do, just for the pure adrenaline rush of the moment. The days flew by, and before we knew it, we were at the end of day 4. Everyone went to bed super early that night because our bus ride back home was scheduled for the crack of dawn. It's a brutally long drive from Belgium back to Denmark, where I'm from, so we had to be up and ready by 5 a.m. The problem is, I've always been a total night owl. Forcing myself to sleep early and missing out on the city's nightlife sounded incredibly boring to me. I tried talking a couple of my buddies into staying up, but they were exhausted and completely passed out. Our school had rented out an old historic building for the trip. The boys from my school took up most of it, but there were still a few rooms occupied by random travelers. I was sharing a room with 3 other guys. Once they were asleep, I grabbed my room key, snuck out into the hallway, and pulled out my phone. I opened up Tinder and started messaging a few girls I had matched with in the area. Against all odds, I actually managed to lock down a late-night hookup at an apartment a few miles away. My adrenaline was pumping as I stepped out into the crisp autumn night. Honestly, I thought it was hilarious and thrilling to be exploring this foreign city completely by myself in the dead of night. I plugged the address into my phone's GPS and started walking toward the girl's apartment. As I got further from the tourist areas, the vibe changed fast. I was getting catcalled by creepy old dudes sitting outside dive bars, and I kept looking over my shoulder, constantly paranoid that someone was tailing me. The GPS led me straight into a neighborhood I quickly realized was incredibly poor and sketchy. Huge windows were lit up with bright neon lights for blocks, and male adult workers were posing in them, tapping on the glass with long nails in wild cross-dressing outfits. There were barely any regular pedestrians out, just a few shady-looking guys walking past, everyone minding their own business. Being only 17 and completely alone, those streets freaked me out, but at the same time, I was fascinated because I had never seen anything like it in my life. Eventually, I made it to the girl's apartment. By this point, I was pretty damn far away from my hotel. Luckily, the meetup went great. We had a good time, nothing weird happened, and there were absolutely no red flags. Once I was ready to leave, I opened up my phone map again to find my way back. It was September, and it was freezing outside. Now that the excitement of my little adventure had worn off, the reality of the situation set in. I was not looking forward to walking miles through pitch-black, sketchy, garbage-strewn streets. To make matters worse, a freezing rain started coming down, and I was only wearing a light jacket. The route the GPS was taking me was completely different from the way I had come. The streets were dead, except for groups of men loitering near tight, dark alleys. No more bars, no neon lights, and zero signs of the downtown area I was familiar with.
Right as a massive wave of panic started washing over me, my phone screen went completely black. My battery died. I totally lost it. I didn't care who heard me. I just started screaming every curse word I knew into the empty street, literally smacking my phone against my hand, trying to force it to turn back on. Nothing. It was completely dead. I looked around desperately, trying to find anything even slightly familiar, but I was totally lost. Realizing I had to grow up real fast and handle the situation I'd put myself in, I walked straight up to the very first guy I saw walking past. He could clearly tell I was desperate, terrified, and obviously pretty young. Luckily for me, he actually seemed willing to help. I told him a quick, watered-down version of my story and asked for directions to the city center, knowing I could find my hotel from there. The guy was around my dad's age. I don't remember exactly what he looked like, but he seemed friendly enough.
but instead of just pointing me in the right direction, he offered to walk me all the way back to my hotel, even with the heavy rain pouring down on us. Still, I wasn't stupid. He was a stranger in a bad neighborhood, so I kept my hand clamped firmly inside my pocket, holding on to my keys and my dead phone the entire walk. When we finally reached the building, I thanked him, profoundly relieved that the worst night of my life was finally over. I used my key to unlock the heavy main door. The building had an automatic locking system, which gave me a huge sense of security. You pull the door shut, it locks automatically. No way for anyone to follow you inside unless they have a key, right? I snuck back into my room, took a quick shower to warm up, got ready for the mere 2 hours of sleep I had left, and completely passed out in my bunk. A few hours later, I woke up with a bright flashlight pointed directly at my face. I squinted, trying to block the light, and realized a stranger's face was inches away from mine. Maybe it was the sheer shock of having a grown man hovering over me, but I couldn't even squeeze out a sound. My heart literally jumped out of my chest. I scrambled up as far as I could in the bottom bunk, my entire body tensing up. I asked him in English, "Who the hell are you?"
Even though I was terrified, the guy didn't seem aggressively threatening, and my 3 roommates were still dead to the world right next to us, so I tried to keep my cool. He looked at me calmly and said he was from the front lobby. He claimed he was helping my friend Samuel find something he had lost. Confused, dizzy, and totally disoriented, I reached over to grab my phone and watch, which were laying right beside me on the mattress. The time was around 4 a.m. I did have a friend named Samuel on the trip, and he was notoriously impulsive and messy, so the story actually made sense to my sleep-deprived brain. The man backed away from my bed and started rummaging through our closet. I sat up, turned on my phone's flashlight, pointed it at him, and asked, "What did Samuel even lose? Why are you looking in our closet at 4 in the morning?" "His visa," the guy answered smoothly. "He can't find his visa." Right then, another student from our school walked into our room. He started talking to the man about the missing visa too. At this point, they were both actively going through our stuff. Being completely exhausted, I just assumed everyone was up trying to help Samuel out, even though the whole vibe was incredibly bizarre. Soon, my roommates started waking up, asking the exact same questions I had. I answered them sleepily, explaining what the guy had told me, but I muttered that the whole thing felt weird. Eventually, heavily fatigued and unable to keep my eyes open, I fell right back asleep. The last thing I remember before blacking out was staring at the man as he methodically scanned through the backpack belonging to the guy across from me. When morning came and everyone woke up for the bus, the horrifying truth finally came out. 3 guys from our school were missing all their valuables: visas, laptops, cash, and personal electronics, all gone. And the guy who claimed to be from the lobby, yeah, he obviously didn't work there. How he got into the building is still a total mystery, but apparently he had crept into multiple rooms, stole Samuel's visa first, read his name off of it, and then used the "Samuel lost his visa" cover story when he woke people up. He completely took advantage of a bunch of tired, naive American and European teenagers in a foreign country. The chilling realization I had later was about why he was hovering inches from my face with that flashlight. He was looking at my phone and watch laying right next to my head, about to swipe them, but stopped when I opened my eyes. There were no security cameras in the building. The police showed up pretty fast, and our bus ride home got pushed back for hours, so Samuel and the others could file reports. We never got an update on what happened to the thief after we left. But to this day, I can't help but shake the feeling that what happened that night was entirely my fault. Someone could have easily followed me back to the building without me noticing in the dark,
Or, worse, in my rush to get inside out of the freezing rain, maybe I didn't slam the heavy main door hard enough for the automatic lock to click. I was almost certainly the last person to enter the building before the thief did. And honestly, if he wasn't just trying to steal my phone, there's always the terrifying possibility that he pointed that flashlight directly in my face and nobody else's because he recognized me, because he was the exact same guy who had kindly walked me back to my hotel in the rain.
The next story. This happened back in the late summer of 2019. My friends and I decided to take a trip to the far north of Norway, way up in the Arctic Circle, to a region called Lofoten. If you've ever seen pictures of it, it's honestly one of the most breathtaking places on Earth. Massive mountains jutting straight out of the ocean, perfect for hiking and anything outdoors. We flew into the nearest regional airport to rent a car, but population density is incredibly sparse up there. Large towns are few and far between. We had booked an apartment in a tiny remote fishing village, which was a brutal 7-hour drive from the airport we flew into. After a grueling day of flights and layovers, all we wanted was to get to our rental as fast as possible. To make matters worse, Norwegian speed limits are famously strict and they do not mess around with fines. As the only named and registered driver in our group, it was an absolute struggle for me to stick to the limit while fighting off intense exhaustion. There were these massive empty stretches of road that seemed to extend for miles into the darkness without another headlight in sight. By the time midnight rolled around, we had finally broken the back of the journey. We had just passed the only main town in the entire area, meaning we had about 40 minutes left until we reached our village. Most of the highway up to that point had been single lanes, but right outside town, it split into an overtaking lane. I took the opportunity to pass a slow-moving Volkswagen Golf that was cruising ahead of us. I passed the car, thinking absolutely nothing of it, and went right back to chatting with my friends in the car. But then, things got weird. The moment I pulled in front of this Golf, the driver aggressively tailgated us. He would repeatedly accelerate right up to our bumper, stay there for a second, and then back off. He did this a few times before suddenly flipping on a massive, blinding floodlight mounted on the roof of his car. Because winters up in the Arctic Circle mean months of total darkness, a lot of locals install these heavy-duty lights on their rigs. But this thing was insanely bright and incredibly distracting. It completely filled my rearview mirror, blinding me while I was trying to navigate winding roads. Like I said, Norwegians take traffic laws seriously, so I figured maybe he took offense to what he thought was a reckless pass, even though I did absolutely nothing wrong. I did my best to stay calm, keep my composure, and strictly obey the speed limit, hoping he'd get bored and back off. I muttered to my buddy Jesse, who was riding shotgun, "Let's see how long this guy follows us." Unsurprisingly, he didn't stop. My patience was wearing paper thin. I pushed the gas a bit and put some distance between our cars, and strangely, he didn't speed up to catch us. The whole group was getting seriously nervous by now, but since he was lagging behind, we thought the danger had passed. Then we hit a red light at a narrow one-lane bridge leading into our fishing village. I was pensively staring into the mirror, and right as the light turned green, I saw his headlights wind around the corner behind us. He was still there. At that exact moment, I decided it would be incredibly stupid to drive straight to our apartment. If we pulled up and started unpacking our luggage, this psycho would know exactly where we were sleeping.
So instead of going to the rental, I started making random, erratic turns through the narrow side streets of the village just to see if he was truly tracking us. My heart absolutely sank when he made every single turn right behind us. Everyone in the car started panicking. It was now past 1 a.m. We were in a completely isolated part of the world, and we had no idea who this guy was. Suddenly, I made a wrong turn and hit a dead end. I had no choice but to execute a tight three-point turn to face him. He pulled up and tried to block us in, but his Golf was fairly small. With some aggressive steering and hard wheel work, I managed to squeeze our car past his. As we brushed past him, I caught a direct look at the driver's face. His expression was completely cold and dead. No anger, no emotion. His eyes were just locked onto us, tracking our movement as we raced past his window. There were 3 guys in our group, and with numbers on our side, my first instinct was to park, get out, and confront him. But this is a rural, rugged area where firearms are common and legal for hunting and whaling. For all I knew, he had a loaded shotgun sitting right on his passenger seat. This dude had already stalked us for an hour in the dead of night. Who knew what he was capable of? Suddenly, Jesse decided to call the local police station, which was a nightmare in itself because we didn't know our exact location and we didn't speak Norwegian. Luckily, we managed to get a hold of an emergency operator who spoke perfect English. They told us an officer could take our details, but we had to drive all the way back to the station in the town we had passed, another 40 minutes drive. I slammed on the gas and flew down the highway. This time, the guy didn't stay back. He was riding our bumper the entire way. As we finally started seeing signs for the town and houses on the outskirts, the Golf suddenly slowed way down. I felt a brief wave of relief, thinking he was scared of the town.
But that feeling vanished instantly. Looking in my rearview mirror, I watched 2 other cars pull out from a dark side road and join him. One pulled out in front of the Golf, and the other pulled in behind him. It wasn't just one freak anymore. There was now a coordinated convoy of 3 cars traveling like a pack of wolves right behind us. We were blindly following Google Maps to the police station. It took us deep into an industrial harbor area full of dark warehouses, shipping containers, and creepy side alleys. The station was supposed to be at the very end of the road. As we yanked our car into the gravel parking lot, we saw the 3-car convoy suddenly split up and scatter in different directions. They obviously knew we were at the cops. But when we looked at the station, our jaws dropped. The building was pitch black. There was seemingly no one inside, and the doors were locked. We frantically called the operator back, and she assured us, "Stay calm, an officer is coming on foot from around back." For 5 agonizing minutes, we sat in that dark car. Out in the distance, we could see the headlights of those 3 cars circling the perimeter of the harbor like sharks smelling blood. Finally, a massive male officer emerged from the shadows behind the building. At first, he seemed kind of aloof and annoyed, but the moment he saw the girls in our group crying and visibly shaking, his demeanor shifted. He realized this wasn't a joke. He told us to stay put while he went to grab a police van to escort us safely out of town. We started driving out, with the officer trailing closely behind us. We anxiously scanned every dark alleyway and warehouse loading bay as we moved. Suddenly, out of nowhere, 2 of the cars pulled out from the shadows, framing us. Then the original Volkswagen Golf roared past our driver's side. The driver shot me that exact same motionless, icy stare as he went by. I slammed on my brakes and pounded the horn repeatedly, praying the officer would realize this was the guy stalking us. A second later, to my absolute relief, the police van's blue and red lights cut through the dark. The officer swung the van around and blocked the Golf from going any further.
I heard the van door slam shut, and Jesse immediately jumped out of our car and ran behind the police van to see what was happening. I followed a minute later, thinking that if things went south, we had a burly cop with us, and this was our best chance to end this. As I stepped up to the vehicle, I saw the face of our stalker under the streetlights. He looked like a totally average, ordinary guy. He opened his door and muttered something to the officer in a thick Russian or Eastern European accent. He looked over at me, pointed, and told the cop, "See, he's still staring at me." I was furious, expecting the cop to throw him in cuffs. But the officer pulled me aside and explained that technically the guy hadn't broken a single law. It isn't a crime to drive on a public road at night, and without an explicit threat, there was nothing to charge him with. However, the officer did take down all of his personal information, his ID and his license plate. He handed us a card and said if this guy came anywhere near us again, we had a direct line to his unit and it would be escalated to a criminal offense. The officer escorted us past the town limits, as promised, but he couldn't drive us all the way back to our remote village. He turned around at the highway boundary, leaving us on our own. I breathed a heavy sigh of mixed relief and absolute dread as we drove into the dark. I kept my eyes glued to the mirrors the whole way back, but thankfully nobody followed us. Still, I wasn't taking any chances. I ran a couple of blocks away from our actual apartment, ran inside, and locked every single door and window behind us. The most disturbing part of the entire saga was those extra 2 cars. Who were they? Why did he call them? And what exactly did they have planned for us in the middle of nowhere? I'm just incredibly thankful we managed to navigate our way to a police station in a foreign country before we found out. The rest of the trip went beautifully, and Norway really is a stunning part of the world. But it's incredibly sobering to look back at that night and realize just how differently it all could have ended.